Hi, this is Dawn Lynn. You're listening to TV Confidential.
Tony Figueroa and Donna Allen are back with us as we continue our look at this week in TV history.
All right, so we have November 2nd, 1992. And that was a sad day for entertainment all around. That was the day that Hal Roach died.
Little Rascals.
Little Rascals, Laurel and Hardy, Harold Lloyd. But I think, all of us, especially from our generation, I think the Little Rascals are the ones that we always associate with him. It's amazing. He died at 100 years old. I mean, shortly before his passing, he did appear on the Oscars. I think one of the best moments of that night, where Billy Crystal pointed him out at the audience. He stood up to speak, and he wasn't mic'd.
Yes, I remember that.
Oh, God,
and remember, and Billy Crystal said, well, I guess it's appropriate since he started in silent films and just steals it. But it was one of those moments, why are you going to pause the broadcast to point him out if you could,
you're not, or at least have someone in the aisle with a mic that you can hand to him. Yes.
Yeah, because you don't just here's at that particular point in time, there probably wasn't anybody in that audience that wasn't influenced by his work. He was not a product of a bygone era. And strangely enough, I think more people were probably influenced by his work thanks to television than the original medium that it came from.
Yeah.
The Our Gang comedies, or the Little Rascals as they were later referred to in syndication, were the ones that all of us grew up watching.
Yeah, they reran forever.
Yeah, they were on the King brothers, who later found this young talk show host named Oprah.
Yes,
and helped her out. I hope she did well afterwards.
The network's doing a lot better these days. That's for sure.
But yeah, that's what got the King brothers started. Was basically they got the old Little Rascals.
King World.
King World, yes. King World Productions. That's what they were operating out of their garage from Hollywood legend, and they were syndicating the Little Rascals.
A lot of big companies started off in their garage.
Yes, so
or their bedroom.
Or well. But anyway, so that's what got it started, and those characters have been around. I mean, a lot of people don't realize because unfortunately the films didn't survive, but they existed in the silent era. There was a lot of history before Spanky and Alfalfa showed up. I think those are the iconic Spanky, Alfalfa, Buckwheat, Darla. And then later on, Robert Blake, when he was still Mickey Gubitoshi.
That's right.
Which is his real name, Michael Gubitoshi. But, Jackie Cooper was part of that earlier on.
That's right.
And there were some of the silent characters that actually did grow up and do some other work. Sadly, I think by the time that Hal Roach died, I think he had outlived most of the Rascals.
Yes. Shame.
And when you break it down, I mean, it is rather sad that a lot of these guys did not do well as adult actors. Alfalfa did appear in It's a Wonderful Life.
That's right. He played the one who did he pushed the button that split the floor.
Yeah, that split the dance floor, opened up the pool. That was him.
Carl
Switzer, and but he did there were a couple other things that he worked with some other Little Rascals. They were kind of like a version of the Bowery Boys. Spanky later on went on to do other stuff and was successful, and then became a TV show host and ran the Little Rascals. And Spanky, to his credit, and I wish more people would acknowledge him for this, he also his own time, his own money, fought on behalf of the other Little Rascals, many who were not doing well, to get some money for them.
Yeah.
Because when the shows were syndicated on television, or the shorts were syndicated on television, there were T-shirts, lunch boxes, all this stuff going out there, and these guys did not see any of it. And so that was a huge thing, and he spent a lot of his time trying to get money.
Please tell me he was successful.
I don't think he was. I don't think that they got anything. And I think this is an interesting coincidence. The Three Stooges had similar problems when they did their shorts for Columbia, which is their, and then Screen Gems, which was the television arm of Columbia, ran these things. So they got paid for the initial work, and then when it was re-showing on television, they didn't get a piece of that action.
Which is the case with a lot of actors, from the 50s and 60s who got paid to do the original 13 or 26 or whatever, and then they would be paid for maybe 5 or 6 reruns.
Yeah.
I think that was the standard contract through the 60s, and that was it.
That was it. And there are people who say, so what? And there are people saying, well, nobody knew that we would be watching these things. In some cases,
nobody knew that these shows from the 50s and 60s would be populating and be the mainstay of content for X number of cable channels.
Yes.
30 years later.
Or who knew that you would have videotape, DVD, Blu-ray, all this stuff coming on, that people would have an interest in what you did at that time, because they were only, living for today.
But at the same time, as television continued to catch on, so this is as funny as that sounds, I mean, and you would have a better idea of the different type of forms. I mean, that would be reflected in later contracts negotiated in the 70s and 80s. But still, I mean, in the 70s, you didn't anticipate DVDs or things like that.
No, and it's one of these ongoing things. But the Stooges were able to, and I think there's another interesting connection I'll get to. The Stooges, when these shows were being syndicated, these shorts were being syndicated, usually, across America. You would have in the afternoon when kids came home from school, Uncle this or Captain this, or, locally it was Sheriff John in L.A. who just passed away. Right. And you would have these local hosts, they might have a Bugs Bunny, a Popeye, and maybe a Three Stooges or a Little Rascals short. The Stooges were becoming popular to a new generation because they were being shown on TV, and they started making the public appearances, which was very lucrative for them. So they weren't making money off of the shorts, but they were going across the country and doing personal appearances at big venues in cities across America. So big did they become that they were able to make that their own business, where they did have control. And they did use at that time. It underwent a couple of names, and there's been a few legal problems between the heirs. Ironically, Bela Lugosi Jr. was one of the attorneys who was working on it. I know, make up your own joke. But that allowed them to make money, merchandise themselves, and also Hollywood came calling, and they did features after that. So things did turn around, and towards the end. Unfortunately, that did not happen for the Little Rascals. Also, there is a Little Rascals feature project in the works, probably based on the Three Stooges project that was released earlier.
I hope it's better than the one that was done 15 years ago.
That seems to be the consensus. The Little Rascals are also a product of their time.
Yeah,
I would say the Stooges, you might say that they're timeless to one extent. Even the slapstick comedy is of a certain comedic era, but you could still put those characters in a multitude of settings. When they made those shorts, it's like Columbia has a set that's a courtroom. Well, then write something for the Three Stooges in the courtroom before we tear down the courtroom set.
Right.
That's how they would operate. But the Little Rascals were really a product of a time period, and that was the Depression era in the United States. That's certainly dictated their wardrobe and what these kids were doing to keep themselves entertained. And then as time went on, World War II came in, and they were very much part of the war effort. Also, by the time World War II came in, Hal Roach sold them to MGM. And MGM did certainly, had a different interpretation of who these kids are. So they weren't the young mischief makers, that are just kids being kids. I think there was a little bit more, they were a little bit more cleaned up, a little bit more patriotic, a little bit more, ideal American kids.
And a lot less funny.
And a lot less funny, yeah. That was
the older I hate to say this, but the older they got, the less cute they were, and the cuteness was so much of the appeal.
Yeah, it's part of the charm.
And Spanky and Darla probably had one of the longer runs. I mean, they were both involved for 10 years, from like 2 to 12. Other kids, hit the growth spurt and they were gone in a much faster time. But Spanky went from the cute 2-year-old who could say a couple of words and would just steal every scene he was in to being the leader of the gang.
Right.
And
not that he was not a bad leader, but he was just
he also was not a tall kid, so he stayed short, so that helped his longevity.
Yeah. It's like when Beaver grew up. He was just not as funny at the end of Leave It to Beaver as he was at the beginning.
Well, yeah, it's just, like anything, it's these kids, their circumstances changed. Yes. And we could have this conversation about so many things when this, it's either the kids get old or the Depression's over. Now we're at war, so the circumstances are going to change, and they're going to have different focuses and different agendas. They did cycle through a lot of those kids, though, to kind of keep things fresh, and some of the stories are memorable. And they did stuff that they were able to do at that particular time period, and they were a very important part of who we are and what we're about. And it was just something that we truly enjoyed. They were also a product of a time where we did have local TV hosts. Maybe it could have been the newsman or the weather guy or something.
Or all of the above.
Or all the above,
the
depending on the market, where they would put him in a sailor suit or a sheriff's hat, and this was, like I said, whatever, captain whatever, sheriff whatever, and they would be the host of the, the afternoon carnival cavalcade, and they would be, showing these. They would probably say, oh, and this weekend at such and such mall, this is going to happen. These people are going to appear. Or they would do local commercials for local stores. Oh, and kids, this Saturday at so-and-so's toy store, they're going to sell this. Eventually, there were groups like Action Against Children's Television that, wanted to put the kibosh on that. And it was, eventually there were syndicated shows that they could put in those places. Yeah. So that kind of eliminated the...
But again, that goes back to the charm of early television.
Yeah.
And,
And sometimes Spanky would show up in the studio. He would be doing a tour, and he would be visiting the local stations that showed the Little Rascals, or the Stooges would show up and visit the station.
Become an advertiser or underwriter of TV Confidential and let our brand help promote your brand. To find out more, go to televisioncconfidential.com/advertise.
Are you tired of high cable TV rates? Sign up for Dish today and get a $500 bonus offer while supplies last. Plus, lock in your price for 2 years guaranteed. Call All American Dish, your Dish authorized retailer now.
800-296-1251. 800-296-1251. That's 800-296-1251. Offers require credit qualification, 24-month commitment, early termination fee, and e-auto pay. Restrictions apply. Call for details.
At Roberts, with a few minutes, enough time to tell you that our friends at Shout Factory are paying homage to rock and roll legend Chuck Berry with a collector's edition DVD and Blu-ray release of Chuck Berry, Hail Hail, Rock and Roll. Chuck Berry, Hail Hail, Rock and Roll, the 1987 film, directed by Taylor Hackford, that is also the latest release from Shout Select. One night in 1986, Keith Richards invited Eric Clapton, Robert Cray, Linda Ronstadt, Etta James, and a host of other music legends for a special evening of music to commemorate Chuck Berry's 60th birthday. Taylor Hackford captured that evening on film and released it in 1987 as Chuck Berry, Hail Hail, Rock and Roll. In addition to the film itself, the collector's edition release of Chuck Berry, Hail Hail, Rock and Roll includes 54 minutes of rehearsal footage, The Reluctant Movie Star, a behind-the-scenes making-of documentary, Chuckisms, a collection of classic Chuck Berry remarks, The Burnt Scrapbook, Chuck Berry reminiscing over his musical memories with the band's Robbie Robertson, an introduction by director Taylor Hackford, and a whole lot more. The Shout Select series from Shout Factory shines a light on films that definitely deserve a spot in your personal collection. Chuck Berry, Hail Hail, Rock and Roll, Collector's Edition, now available on Blu-ray and on DVD through our friends at Shout Factory.